Shah Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Hello there, my name is Harish Shah, and I'm the guy that they refer to as the Singapore Futurist. Now, how did that nickname, the Singapore Futurist, come about? It's pretty simple. When I started as a professional futurist back in 2013, having been born and raised in Singapore, living and working out of Singapore, there weren't too many Singaporean futurists back then. I made a lot of friends around the world within the global futurist community, and I just came to be remembered by the people I interacted with within the futurist community as the Singapore futurist, and it's stuck ever since. And besides, the name of one of the first blogs I started was singaporefuturist.blogspot.com, inspired by what the other futurists from different parts of the world were calling me, the Singapore futurist. So that's a little about me. Now, a little further introduction before I get into the topic of today. Excuse me. um, a festive season has just passed in Singapore, so I've had a lot of goodies. So you can tell from the voice, but I hope it's not going to be too much of a distraction, right? So a little bit about myself before I start on today's topic that Mr. Felix Bob has very kindly invited me to speak about today, which is X Reality. For the last 7 years in Singapore, I've been operating this consultancy called StretServe Consultancy. StretServe meaning strategic services. I've just shortened it to StretServe, and basically it's one of Singapore's first future-focused management consulting practices. So that said, let's talk about X Reality, a whole new technological concept, right? It's not new to people who are familiar with futurist or future study speak, or not new to people who are a little progressive in the technological space, high technology or emerging tech space. But X reality is so new a concept that its very definition is yet still evolving, is still developing. So there isn't a standard definition for it yet. Now, most of you watching this or listening to me here may have and would likely have, unless you've been living on Pluto for the last few years, you would have heard of virtual reality, definitely. Likely, you've also heard of augmented reality, where crazy people go about hunting for Pokemons that aren't exactly there, but somehow magically, oh, what sorcery, they're able to see on the screens of the smartphones, right? So that's augmented reality. Just a small example being the Pokemon game, right? Catching Pokemons, right? That's that. Then you have mixed reality, right? So you have all these engineered realities. Why do you call them engineered realities? Very simple reason, because they're not natural, they're not actual, they're human made, right? So they are enhancing our perceptive experiences, and they're engineered just for that through technology, right? That's why they call engineered realities. Virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. Now the next stage in this is, you can call it extended reality, or you can call it simply X reality. Some people are calling extended reality and X reality two different things. I think they're the one and the same. Why do I say so? Firstly, when I say it's X reality is extended reality, is because first and foremost, fundamentally, it is extending the human capacity, the human experience, and the ability for human beings to perceive, right? Now, X, when you just define it as, or you just call it X reality instead of extended reality, what X actually means is something without definition, something without limits, something without parameters necessarily, and something that can go on growing and evolving and changing limitlessly. And it can have meanings that are not necessarily finite into perpetuity, right? And that's the threshold that we are arriving at. After VR, AR, MR, we are arriving at a threshold of X reality. And I have not even begun to give you my definition of what X reality is. Now, let me give you my definition taking this opportunity on this platform, right? So, in my view, X reality is when all the established technologies that you would know of today, that you are using today, that have a place in a long term future. When I say long term future, I mean real long term, I mean the next 50 to 100 years, right? And you take every emerging technology, meaning a new technology that has not been in existence yet, not been in common use yet, that is just past the hypothesis stage, meaning it's feasible. We know that scientifically, technically, technologically, this thing is feasible, it's possible, but it may not be out there in the market yet. It may not be commercialized yet. You may not be able to buy it yet, right? Whether business to business or business to consumer, it may not be in sale yet, right? In a sales process yet. It may not be even at a diffusion stage, right? It may not even be at a prototyping stage, but you know it's no longer a hypothesis. People are actually working on it. For example, 6G technology is not exactly a hypothesis. 5G is just beginning to be, you know, rolled out. People are just beginning to start seeing what 5G is like. And there's some folks out there in different parts of the world, such as North Korea and Scandinavia, who've already started working on 6G. So that is what you call post hypothesis stage technology, right? So take all your established technologies of today that are likely not going to be disrupted anytime, even in the long term future, to be rendered obsolete or redundant. Take them and take all your emerging technologies past hypothesis. And when you have a convergence of all of them, and that convergence, when it defines the human environment, right, all around us, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our villages, towns, cities, in our countries, and in the world as a whole, you will get X reality. Now, X reality is something that is going to enhance the human experience such that you, yes, you, listening to this, when you are alive to see X reality become manifest around you, you will become someone who is omnipresent. Omnipresent meaning you are anywhere and everywhere, wherever you want to be, at the same time simultaneously, without getting out of your seat in the comfort of your home or in the comfort of your office, or while sitting on a beach in Bora Bora or in Hawaii, right? And you're everywhere. You are in physical spaces halfway around the world. You are in virtual spaces that do not exactly exist, or you're virtually in simulated environments simulating planets in neighboring galaxies, right? And you're in multiple places at the same time, at will, instantaneously, right? So you're omnipresent. Then you are omniscient, meaning you know everything that you need to know or you want to know. If you have a question in your mind, the answer comes to you instantly on any topic. For example, you may never have gone for first aid training, medical training, never paid attention to health education classes in school, right? But when someone around you is hurt and you quickly need to attend to that to help that person, possibly save that person's life, answers in first aid, emergency medicine, even, right? Things that people in the past would have had to spend 5 years, 6 years, with diligence and focus to study, would start coming to you, and you'd be able to help a person to save his or her life, right? So that's omniscience. And then you're talking about omnipotence. You can do anything you want to do. You can achieve anything you want to do, right? So there's no limit of your reach, there's no limit of your knowledge, and there's no limit on what you can achieve, right? So even if you are the world's skinniest person, which I probably am, right? So one of the nicknames I've also earned, besides being the Singapore futurist, is the world's skinniest futurist, because I weigh quite a bit. But even if you're that, you want to get into sumo wrestling against someone who's probably one of the heaviest persons alive, you'd probably be able to do that without getting hurt too badly, right? So that's omnipotence. Now you're going to wonder, how is all this going to happen with this little thing that I'm talking about called X reality? It's very simple. Convergence of all the technologies you can think about that are presently established with a long-term future, and emerging technologies that are currently in development with a long-term future, such as, for example, brain-computer interface. Some of you may have heard of that, where the computer is directly able to take instruction from your thoughts by reading your brainwave signals, right? And you merge that with tangible artificial intelligence. We are talking about tangible artificial intelligence because we're talking about the sort of advanced artificial intelligence that is capable of autonomously, independently, without human supervision, developing artificially intelligent software or programs of its own to carry out certain functions that we have tasked that artificially intelligent technology or software or system to do, right? So that's tangible artificial intelligence. Now you take that, you let that converge with brain computer interface, with autonomous robots, with the internet of everything. What do you get? You get this little thing called, part and parcel of X reality as I see it, this little thing called the global brain, where all living forms, all living beings, not just humans, but through sensors, right? Um, Animals and plants even are connected, right? And even the seismology of the planet is sort of connected to a single system. So basically, you have every thought, human thought, right? You have the different plant and animal behaviors and movements. You have the weather system, right? Weather cycle, seismological, forgive my tongue twisting there, seismological events, right? All feeding into a single system. Then all your business processes, financial transactions, production operations, all feeding information into a single system. So the whole world, right? The entire planet starts working like a single brain, processing all this information, storing it as memory and working on it, processing it, and drawing beneficial outcomes from that process of, well, information processing, right? To offer answers and solutions that are dynamic, right? But that at the same time also enable individuals who are living as part of that global brain, the ordinary human beings like you and I, to do what we've not been able to do in the past. Because look at it this way: somebody somewhere owns a 3D printer which is able to 3D print objects with 4D, basically dynamic material, 4D printing material, right? Somewhere in Canada, I'm here sitting in Singapore, I have an imagination, right, which is scientifically feasible. It's something that scientifically can be executed, but here in Singapore, I do not have the means to produce that. There's someone in Canada who would like to have that object. So I think of that object, the AI does the work, finds the necessary technical answers as to how that product can be manufactured, which I may not have the know-how to doing. And that 3D printer somewhere in Canada, you talk about, well, sharing economy, sharing production resources, right? So someone in Canada lets me use his 3D printer with his material, and that object gets printed and it gets sold to a guy living 150 meters away, because he or she would like to have that product that no one else has thought about and developed. X reality, right? Or I'm producing goods that are not scientifically possible in actual physical reality in the virtual world for people to enjoy through haptic experiences in virtual worlds, right? And virtual worlds are not that far away. In 2019, Facebook did announce that there was this Horizon project going on of a virtual world which was anticipated for, well, launch sometime in 2020. I've not heard of anything yet. Maybe I'm behind time or I've been out of the loop because I've been busy with other stuff. But I guess maybe COVID and the developed economic outcomes of COVID has influenced certain decisions to launch that, or, well, diffuse that virtual world, which is a Facebook subsidiary, Horizon. But there are other virtual worlds in the making as well, where you can completely immerse yourself, not just in terms of audio visual experiences, but physical experiences through haptics, right? So when all these things that I just mentioned, I just, in such a short time, in about 15 minutes, I've mentioned so many technologies just thrown at you like curveballs, right? Haptic technologies where you feel virtual objects, or objects that are halfway around the world, right? You remotely feel those objects with maybe virtual reality gloves, right? Haptics. Or you can feel a virtual hug, right? And then you have holographics, which is something I've not mentioned yet. I mentioned virtual worlds. I mentioned robotics. I've mentioned 3D printing. I've mentioned shared resources, right? So, which is, well, a byproduct of the new technological era that we've sort of entered anywhere past 2015, right? Wherever you consider the start point, which we are at today, right? Which has made things like, I mean, of course, Airbnb and Uber came about long before 2015. Maybe, there have been sharing companies that have come about before 2010, but it's really post 2015 where the sharing economy has really taken off, where you're sharing resources. But of course, today the sharing economy, if, as of 2020, is limited to, okay, I've got items I don't want to use anymore. I give it off or pass it on, or sell it on. So even definitions of new economic models that have come about because of technological progress, right, uh, are still evolving and constantly changing, and then changing back and reverting and so on and so forth, right? The sharing economy these days, when you say it, most people will think of, well, items that are, pre-loved and then sold off Facebook groups, something like that, or WhatsApp group swapping and so on, like that, right? I've got a book, then okay, let's do a book swap in a book group over WhatsApp, something like that, and then those books keep getting passed on, right? Sharing economy. So we save a lot of money, that sort of thing, right? But how did all these kind of things come about? They were not possible with pre 21st century technologies, right? Where internet got cheap and accessible and common, and then we went into app-based communication on our mobile devices, and then we got really mobile. That's where we started to do these sort of things, right? And especially with social networks and stuff like that, right? Which cross influence other apps, right? So that's how we've gotten into these things, right? So human behaviors also change. So that has an element of contribution to what I'm talking about today, X reality, where a lot of things will be shared as well, because not everybody will need to own every article of technology. But the point is, we are reaching a threshold where there will be so many different types of articles of technology of different varieties, all converging, right? All at once, to enable us to do things that are going to change the very definition, the very limits, and the very parameters of how the human life and human form can be experienced. First and foremost, your physical environment is no longer the limit of your physical experience, because you can have simulated experience on the body through haptics. You can experience stuff in virtual worlds just as you can in your immediate physical environment, right? Remote physical experiences on different planets without leaving planet Earth on a space shuttle, right? So you're taking away limits altogether, X reality. In terms of production, right, where your imagination is your only limit, apart from, of course, your scientific sanity, right? I mean, if you want to fly without a rocket booster, that's likely not going to happen without, cracking the code of levitation. Well, let's not go there because that's not mainstream science, right? But if you want to fly, it may very well just so happen that the technology around you will enable the assembly of a certain product that will actually allow you to literally take off without having to go onto the market to buy a private jet, right? For example, you may just be able to, at a simple whim and thought of the mind, right, get technology to 3D print and then with domestic robots assemble a quadcopter autonomous drone for you that can actually take off with you seated and safely strapped inside. Imagine that. X reality, right? So that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, because your interaction with technology and other people will no longer be with limits. You imagine this, like everything is through a MRI lens, right? So to study the biology of a plant, you can actually experience moving through the stem of a plant without actually physically cutting one open, right? As big as you are, and the plant could be maybe one quarter of your physical size. And yet you'd be able to, without hurting or killing or cutting the plant, be able to see the inside of it, right? 360 degrees, X reality, right? So basically, it's complete, seamless, effortless, right? Transcendence through the physical and the virtual, the actual and the engineered. X reality. Now, that said, X reality is something that, even after all these things I just talked about, a lot of you may feel is still fantasy, right? Okay. Why am I so confident that this is a topic that we should talk about today? It's because I believe that we are at the cusp, especially with announcements from very serious mainstream companies like Facebook in the year 2019, right? That they want to launch a virtual world called Horizon, right? It's a very valid statement to make that we are on a cusp of seeing the emergence or the arrival of X reality. Why do I say this is happening now? First and foremost, we have attained a threshold today where we are at in the human story where nothing you can think of today has not been thought of before. Perhaps in the past, people thought of a lot that was not feasible or possible or technologically within their reach in their times, right? This may be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, right? But in the human story, we've progressed so much that we've probably reached a point where it's probably impossible to think of something that's not been thought about by someone somewhere in the past. Number one. The difference between now and before, at least 20 years ago from today, as I say this, and ever before that, is that we have also reached a threshold where we are at a limit of knowing what is scientifically possible in terms of what is scientifically feasible and within our reach to actually produce. I'm not saying we've reached the end of all the answers to physics, biology, and chemistry, because the universe is yet a very big place. There are a lot of answers still to seek. The processes, even the processes within nature, even on our own planet, are still so dynamic. There's still a lot of answers to get to scientifically. All that aside, but in terms of our ability to develop technology, to build technology, to use technology, we have reached a point where we are at our limits, right? So, whatever is feasible scientifically, we have already come to a point where we can already think of the technology, and we are at a point where we are probably able to at least start producing and working on those technologies, right? Some technologies we may yet be very, very far away in time than others, right? For example, we are already at IoT, the Internet of Things. to get to the Internet of Everything, which is the next stage, right? Where your toothbrush is talking to the light bulb on your ceiling, which is talking to your air conditioner, and your air conditioner is talking to your microwave oven, which is in turn talking to your car. Because when your breakfast is ready, your kitchen wants to inform your car that, okay, he's going to get out anytime soon. Maybe you start cooling the interior, right? Warm up that seat massager, so on and so forth, right? So that's the Internet of Things. We're still some distance away from that, right? It'll take some time to get that far. Then you have this idea of fog robotics and fog technologies and stuff like that. Will take some time, right? But we are still nonetheless at a threshold where if it is scientifically feasible, we have already thought of it, and we have probably got it on at least a to-do list collectively as a human race to produce that technology, if even if we are not prototyping it yet, right? So that's the state we are in. And over the last 20 years, we have leapfrogged our technological capacities so much that if it's possible, we are doing it a lot more rapidly, so rapidly that in the past 5 years alone, we have made so much technological progress that it exceeds all the technological progress from this beginning of, well, 5,000 years ago, right to up to 5 years ago. Take that into perspective, right? If you think about the progress that has already been made with brain computer interface in certain laboratories, if you think about the progress already made with haptic suits, with remote robotics, right? That's already at work. If you talk about the 5G technology, right? That's seen so much controversy throughout 2019, but controversy, no controversy, all that aside, the point is 5G enables you to do stuff that you would believe as stuff of fiction if you're still in the 4G era. Now, how much of a difference is that? 4G cellular network, 5G cellular network. You think of something as stuff of fiction, fantasy in 4G, and it's possible suddenly, and you have certain demonstrations in different parts of the world of that possibility with 5G over the last 2 years. How cool is that? And even as 5G is just being initiated, it's not even seen the light of day in most places. There are people who are already working on 6G. That's how fast we're going, right? So, how far away are we from complete robotization? How far away from our screen interfaces, right? Our LCD interfaces completely disappearing to be replaced by holographics. There are already children's companies, children's watch companies, right, that have been built around a product where you have watch phones where, look, ma, I don't need a wristwatch, I don't need a cell phone rather anymore. All I need is a wristwatch, and I can put in a phone chip and I can make video calls to mom and dad, right? Um, so some things technologies cannot fix. If you're hearing some screaming in the background in this video, that's because I'm working from home. Obviously, I'm using green screen false background as I speak. All right, so that's my kid. But if this were the X reality era, some years down the road, the artificial intelligence on the internet network would automatically, without me even expressing an instruction to the internet, would have filtered out that sound of my child screaming in the background. X reality, right? So I'm that excited about X reality, and I believe this is something that we all should aspire to, that we all should work towards. This is something that we should all encourage. Let me tell you why. It's not just because of commercial benefits, because of all the new economic models that may, well, get thrown up, right? Get be born when X reality becomes a reality. But you consider that if the whole world is connected and you have no barrier, you transcend everything, right? Physical space, knowledge limits, right? Virtual limits. You are able to look inside machinery, both hardware and software, right? The software aspects of what's happening inside a hard drive, right? You can actually enter the software processes to see what's happening, things that X reality will enable, right, with smart glasses and holographics and whatnots, right, haptics and whatnots. Consider the amount of transparency and accountability that will take place in the world. Consider the ease of task and how much time will be freed up on the hands of people to self train, self develop, self evolve their minds through learning, which will be limitless in that sort of environment. And imagine what one can do with that creativity, right? Consider the economic opportunities, consider the level playing fields that become possible where anything and everything that you can think of, technology executes for you. No one gets left behind. Consider the sort of transparency where AI, through this through its convergence with neurotechnology, right, with a host of other technologies, can very precisely, very accurately tell you whether a politician is telling the truth or not when he or she makes a promise at an election rally, whether a politician's intentions are honest or not when he or she makes a certain statement or makes a certain argument in a televised or a broadcast debate in an election period or rally period. Imagine how transparent our world becomes, right? um, Imagine how smooth and how effective policing becomes. Imagine there's no space for manipulation which enable the sort of recruitment and the sort of brainwashing that terrorists today are capable of, which helps them recruit people to carry out very nefarious, very destructive tasks, right? You're talking about a complete end to corruption, complete end to, well, politicians who don't mean what they say. So, end of dirty politics, a complete end to terrorism. You're talking about a peaceful world. You probably have a lot more trust in the world, and that's going to reduce a lot more, that's going to do great for reducing conflict, nation to nation, within nations, right? Between neighbors, between different, all sorts of groups of, along demographic lines, right? So it's going to be a very peaceful, prosperous, happy world. The X reality world, as I call it, is Tectopia because it's a technological utopia. Right up to 2020, right now, utopia has always been seen as something idealistic, something not possible. It's idealistic because it's not realistic. That's been the concept. But what if I told you that with the direction that our technology and our technological evolution is taking today, collectively, all around the world, if given the opportunity for all of it to merge, and I believe at some point, it's only a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it will all converge to bring about this X reality that I've been talking about so far. When that happens, utopia will no longer be an ideal. It will no longer be a fantasy. It will be real. It will be a technological utopia because it will be technologically made possible, technologically granted, technologically driven, but it will be an utopia nonetheless. And that's why I call it Tectopia. And so my wish is, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're interested in having watched this today, my wish is work hard towards it if you have the capacity to work on technology, number one. Number two, if you have some sort of an influence in business, in society, in scholarship, encourage this trajectory of technology and technological convergence and the acceleration and catalyzation of emerging technologies and the convergence of those technologies to bring about this X reality, to bring about this Tectopia, because it's going to do a lot of good for all of humanity. imagine all the answers we can get when so many limits are taken away from the human experience, and how much happiness we can give to people of all different abilities everywhere, whatever their backgrounds and conditions of birth. Thank you.